8, 9, 10. Good evening. It's Thursday, July 9th, 2020 at 7 o'clock. This is the meeting of the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek Board of Education. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is time for public participation during the meeting as indicated on the agenda item. Kevin, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Carpenter.
Here.
Mrs. France.
Here.
Mrs. Long.
Here.
Mr. Price.
Here.
And Mrs. Floffman.
Here.
All right. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Dr. Kozad, would you start please with reports to the board?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the report to the board is a restart plan for fall of 2020. And I just want to make clear from the beginning here that we are not going to, this is an overview of the plan and some highlights of it. We really are looking at putting this plan out next week at the earliest, if we can further work through the details and get all the information put together. Again, as all of you know, and probably everybody that's watching, things continue to evolve and change on a weekly, daily, monthly basis. And so we're trying to gather as much information as possible and make the best decisions as possible with the information that we know at this point in time. So, you know, as we're moving forward to next school year, just making sure that everybody knows it's fluid. We got to be flexible, nimble, just making sure that everybody's patient with us, and we're doing the best we can with the information that we have at that point. So we've been working in collaboration with the Greene County Public Health Department, the other Greene County school districts, Bellbrook-Sugarcreek teachers, staff, administration, parents. I've been looking at Governor DeWine's K-12 school guidance that came out last Thursday. We've been waiting for that for weeks, and that came out. So with all that information, again, I had sent out an email last week with the Greene County plan with all the other Greene County school districts. And so we're going to dig in a little bit on the things in there. So at this point in time, we are planning for 100% return of our students to the school buildings. Again, that decision is grounded in the belief that physically being at school is the best place for the students. It's fundamental to child and adolescent development and well-being, and it outweighs outweighs them being at home for long periods of time. You know, those things of being at home have their own concerns and risks of isolation, of anxiety at being at home, depression, and not interacting with other students, and just being out of that routine of being at school. And so, with that being in mind, bringing back our students, K-12 students and staff, we are requiring that everybody wear a face covering. That's either a face mask or a face shield at school and on the buses. And obviously, there could be certain exceptions to that for a medical reason or things that we could dig a little deeper in. But it's probably good to say that everybody will be required to wear some type of face covering. So again, a face mask, a face shield, those are appropriate. So I'll give you an example of probably a face shield. It's a face shield. This is an example of that face mask. Obviously, people have seen those. And again, I think we can agree probably over the past couple of weeks, communities and counties and states have continued to evolve on increasing the usage of some type of face covering. So along with that, as I stated also in the Greene County plan, there's daily health assessments that kids are going to be self-reporting those at the beginning of the day, making sure that those symptoms are addressed and looked into. And also obviously the cleaning, disinfecting of our buildings, going along with the Greene County Public Health guidelines and working along with them on any confirmed cases that we have. So we're working closely with the Greene County Public Health on those items. Obviously also hand washing, hand sanitizing will be an integral part of the school day. Hand sanitizer is going to be readily available in the schools, but we are also encouraging students to bring their own hand sanitizer also. So that's some big overview and points. Along with that, we are providing, I know some people, for whatever reason they have, is not comfortable with their child coming back to school. So we're going to have two options. We're going to have come back to school along with the guidelines that we have put into place, or you can choose an online option through the school district. So once we do have our official plan out, probably next week, we're going to give about a week for families to be able to choose whether they want to do the online. So they're going to have to opt into the online option. Again, so depending on the numbers, that really is a numbers game of how that's going to look, of teachers and so forth. And so we are looking at working with a professional company that deals with online curriculum. And depending on the numbers, we're either going to work with the teachers that service provides, or we're going to utilize our own staff utilizing that curriculum, because again, we have curriculum set up that is ideal for digital learning. And we are going to choose one semester at a time. Our kids need to choose at least one semester at a time. Also, we are considering, again, these are all the things that we are putting together with this plan. We're also considering a few changes to the start of the school year. We're considering adding a couple additional days of professional development for teachers, so we can make sure that they have all the information, insight, and knowledge that they need for a successful start to the school year. And also considering a staggered start for our students, where half would come the first day, the other half would stay home, the second half would come the second day, the other half would stay at home, and then vice versa for the first 4 days, so that district can get our routines down and so forth, and get that information, and then on that Friday come back in for everybody 100% that Friday. So that is something that we are highly considering and looking into. Again, that would help us ease back into the school year and really work on those routines and procedures that are going to be critical for us. Fall athletics, we are waiting for further guidance from the state on our fall sports. So that is a high level overview. And again, there's, like I said, this is a fluid, continuing situation. I'm going to see if there's any questions or comments from board members as we've been working on this plan, and just trying to see any thoughts, concerns, ideas as we talk through that plan.
I think the community must already be suspecting that we may go with the company, because several comments have been, I want Bellbrook teachers and Bellbrook curriculum. And we know that our teachers are the best in Greene County, the best far beyond that. Springboro, for example, is live streaming their classrooms. I like this. We have a very talented IT department that we pay that could set this up for us. And there is expense to hiring a private company, and we don't have the money to pay it.
That's an interesting concept. From a practicality point of view, it seems pretty daunting. We'd certainly have to look into that just to see what the logistics of that would look like. But
Yes, I would like to hear from the teachers what they feel could be done. Do they feel like they could do live streaming, or are they in favor of spending a lot more money that we don't have with a private company?
Virginia, I think also a concern is just going to be the disconnect, right? That they're not going to be in sync. They cannot be in sync with what is going on within the classes if they're independently doing it, you know. So I think that's a strong argument for streaming and letting them you know, but it's going to be difficult, right? I mean, it's just it's a completely different way of doing things. You know, I sense, and we've seen some correspondence from the community, and there's a lot of, you know, some dissatisfaction about the approaches here. But I think the reality of it is that people really have to reflect that this is not something we've made. You know, we are doing our best to deal with darn near impossible circumstances, and we cannot make a, you know, a Burger King for everybody else. Everybody wants exactly what they need. We've got constraints financially, logistically, practically, and so you know, I'm supportive of the approach that the school is going with of make a choice, you know, and you can't be jumping back and forth, especially if we have to go with an external company, because if just you've got to have, you know, predictability in terms of students and the teachers required for that. So Virginia, all I'd say this: I get what you're saying. I think that's a keen insight, and that you know, it's going to be. I'm concerned about the disconnect that's going to happen as well. So I think we could save some money, but it's also going to be challenging. And I'm not sure all teachers are supportive of live streaming their class, but I personally think that's what we probably need to do. I think we need to debate it some more. Those are just my general thoughts about this.
I agree. We need to hear from the people who are going to be doing it. They did an excellent job over the last half of the year. They have that under their belt. They probably have an idea of, if we close again, what they would want it to look like. And then there's always the question, if we close again, what do we do with the company? Our teachers should be working. There's a lot of questions to this that need to be thrown around, especially with the staff.
I think that's happening now, the questions, and being able to address that. I know, Dr. Kozad, you've been meeting with teachers, working through the details of the plan too.
Right, and as I'm gonna talk here, Betsy Chads, our curriculum director, she's been working closely with the curriculum piece and has been working with the company and also the teachers and so forth. So I know she already has the link to the meeting here. If she can jump on, Mrs. Chad, as she's doing that. And I'll see if she's going to jump on here in a second.
Before Betsy joins us, how many teachers have we talked to about this? 2 or 3, 15, 50, how many?
Well, again, we've been working with the union and talking with them, and they've been talking with their teachers and so forth. So we have been talking with them, and we've been talking with them.
How extensive have we been talking with them?
I think it's been pretty extensive. I do. We do have Mrs. Chad on the screen now.
Hi, Good evening to everyone. I will do my best to chime in on some of the things that I've been working on with administrators. And you're right, we have been talking to staff, not 100% of them at this point, because the plan, we're still in the early stages because that draft, as you know, hasn't been released to parents. One of the biggest factors in what we need to do for kids is first get the number of students who need to stay home. So once we analyze those numbers, and those numbers we can't get until parents have a chance to look at what the safety protocols will be in the buildings. So thinking as a parent, I can't really say, I am not sending my child to school, or yes, I feel comfortable sending my child to school until I know exactly what the school is doing. So, pardon me, at this point, we're thinking we get the plan solidified, we put that out, we see what the numbers are with this parent survey, and then we have to look closely at who those kids are. Are there 3 kids in second grade, or are there 25 in second grade? That makes a big difference on what program or method of delivery of instruction we should recommend to the family or we should plan for. If it's 25, then absolutely, that could be a class that one teacher who might be interested in teaching remotely might go ahead and have those 25 kids, and then we'd have to look at ways to support them significantly with digital curriculum. One of the issues we do have, and I will cover the live streaming here in a second, but one of the big issues we have when looking at digital curriculum delivery is, what do we have available to us? And we learned really quickly during fourth quarter where our gaps are, because we didn't realize we had gaps because we weren't a digital school. K-5 especially, they're really charged with creating everything they do and trying to transform that to digital platform so that it's meaningful to kids and it's not just a projection of a worksheet on a screen. So we've heard from teachers all through that fourth quarter. I meet with teachers regularly, even through the summer, and we have what we call a curriculum chat, where we work through some of those questions. We share problem solutions across grade levels. And so I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on the challenges we had. We did a lot of things right, but we also have a big gap in tools, what we really need to be an effective digital instruction provider. Secondary, 6 through 12, with recent adoptions, for example, social studies we adopted last year. Those programs are created from the ground up to be delivered both ways. We've got in-person activities. We've got a lot of great digital activities that are very interactive and meet a high standard. And there are standards out there, technology standards, that help curriculum developers meet those criteria for an effective online program. So that's sort of the backdrop of the kinds of issues we have when thinking about a student going online full-time. So I think it was responsible of us to look at what are all the options. We could have a 100% cloud-based through a company with Ohio credentialed teachers delivering content that's developed from the ground up digitally. And I know we haven't presented on what we had in mind or the ones that we like. But they do meet some pretty significant standards. So that's one option. Now, if we go back to that scenario where we have a lot of kids in one grade level, then we absolutely look at how can we have our own teachers delivering that. But I will say, if it's 2 kids in that second grade classroom, and I'm the second grade teacher, and I have 23 children coming face to face, and I have 2 that need digital curriculum delivery, that's adding a huge amount of planning for that teacher if they're going to deliver digital instruction. So we have to actively engage our association. We've talked about it lightly with SEA. They know what we're thinking about, but until we have numbers, we have no idea what level of staff implementation we can really expect, even in terms of administration of all of this. Who's going to manage all of this? Who's going to provide the tech support when we have a department that's lost how many people? So that brings me to live streaming. We did talk about this in an administrative team meeting about a month ago. We were doing face-to-face, socially distanced, but we had a couple of members of the team that had to be remote that day. So we were trying to live stream our meeting. The equipment we have now will not do that effectively. We quickly realized a Chromebook, as you can tell from looking at your faces, just the people in the meeting. They're designed for an up-close interaction. If I were teaching, I'd have a board, maybe a interactive whiteboard, we call those. You can't see through a Chromebook camera the things that are going up on a chalkboard or even on a digital interactive whiteboard. We would have to invest significantly in cameras that would pan wide and wireless microphones for teachers. And then you really wouldn't have a whole lot of the class interaction unless we had multiple microphones in the classroom. So I have a little bit of experience in this area with resident educator teachers. At the end of their 3 years, first 3 years of teaching, they have to submit videos of their classroom teaching. It's a challenge. And when this all first started for them, the new resident educator program, I invested in, I call them camcorders, the smaller digital recorders and tripods. So we have those in the tech department. We only have 2. But remember, those are stationary on a tripod. So I bought something called Swivel. It had a wireless mic, and you could put an iPhone on swivel, and it has a detector on that microphone on your collar, and it will follow the teacher. It still didn't do the trick to really capture what the teachers needed to submit to the state. That was several years ago. I think some equipment has improved, but with that comes an additional cost. Our answer to that now, when teachers submit videos for resident educator summative assessments, is we have to have a person in the room capturing what's happening with the classroom. That would be the level of technology you would need for an effective live stream. You know what it's like here with, you have to have Josh available, you have to troubleshoot, you get some sound things. So in a building, let's say, for example, we have one student in every class at Bell Creek, for example, that's at home remote. So we would have to have minimum 24 plus specials. We would have to have all those set up, going all day. Teachers trained in how to effectively set up, troubleshoot, deal with sound issues, deal with video quality. And you'd also have to provide that student with some other stuff, because I just don't think they'll be able to see everything that would be necessary to get the effective result. Then you look at tech support needed in the buildings. We do not have full-time tech support in every building. So if I have a problem streaming in the moment, I've got a student at home and I've got the other 25 kids in the classroom ready to learn. How do I juggle that? So from the eyes of a teacher, I think that would be hard. In a perfect world, I think it's the best solution. If you could see everything and it would be an experience just like being in the room, I think that would be great. And that's something we can continue to talk about, but it will require significant investment. So, the purpose of finding an online provider is not to take away from the value of the teacher. We absolutely know that's the best place for the kids. We need some kind of an option to take some of that burden off the teacher. So I think once we know the numbers, then we'll be able to engage the teachers and say, okay, you have 5 kids in this class that are going to be online. Let's talk about how we could provide instruction, and we'll find the best way to do that based on the number of kids, what their schedule is. I've given a couple of examples for K-5, but 6-12, you've got kids taking 6+ courses a day. with 6 different areas of licensure. Trying to coordinate that so that all those teachers are developing what they're doing face-to-face as well as what they're doing online in the absence of live stream is asking a lot from the teacher. It was a little different fourth quarter because everyone's online. Then you're planning everything in the same way. But involving our teachers, we absolutely can look at that, and the company provides an option for 100% teacher in the cloud, they call it, Ohio licensed teachers, or they provide the curriculum and one of our teachers delivers it. I like that, but again, are we going to ask a teacher to do face-to-face with the majority of their kids and this other job, which is online learning for this student? So I am very open to more discussions with the teacher, and I think that'll be critical, but we also have to look at their workload and make sure that we're not setting them up for situations that we just don't have the manpower to support, especially in the area of technology.
How many teachers have you actually spoken with?
About this directly, very few at this point, because we've just had the online meeting with the company last week. I know Dr. Kozad's been engaged with Greene County ESC. They're looking at a plan as well. They are following suit and going with the same company that we researched. We have some experience with that company. That's where we started. And I know Amy Baldridge at the Downtown Academy not Learning Center, I apologize, but Downtown Bellbrook, the alternative education programs. She and her staff piloted this program as well as 2 others last spring, and she provided a lot of anecdotal feedback to the research before we went in too deep with information with the company. So she and I have collaborated a lot. Again, it's an option. We have to look at all ends of the spectrum.
Okay, Zoom and Google Classroom do have the option of recording, and the students can look at it later, which would also be an option. And actually, it worked quite well for me last year. My student teachers last year were able very successfully to download to their iPhones things that were going to the state. That worked well. Maybe it's because of their age, they're so much younger, but I really think we need to know how the staff feels as a whole about this, not
Absolutely.
just a couple of teacher representatives.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was always the plan. I think that it's sort of like the safety plan, the reopening plan. Until we have to give them some information first. How many students are we talking about? What does that look like? Because it's different, like I said, if there are 20 in the grade level versus 2. So I think at that point, they'll be able to provide educated opinions about it, because if you just say, what do you think about contracting with an online company? I would say, no, I bet we can do it too. But we need to see what the demand is first and be ready, because we're a month away from school starting. And if we have hundreds of kids in the district and we're asking teachers in just a matter of a few weeks to provide digital learning, I don't feel that's responsible. I think we need to look at everything. And then once we have the numbers, we know who the kids are, what services they get at school, then engage those teachers of those courses, those grade levels, and collectively come up with a plan.
Betsy, thanks for doing your homework. Obviously, this gives a perspective that I think that we didn't have. It's easy just to say, well, let's just stream it from the classroom. And, I've never really looked into this, never really thought much about it. And it obviously opens up a bit of a can of worms once you really get into the details about what it's required to make this happen. I think it's maybe more feasible as you move up in the grades, because literally you could potentially have teachers maybe rely more upon projecting like PowerPoint, or not PowerPoint, but whatever the Google equivalent for that is, and then they could just show their screen. Some of the teachers do that anyhow for some of the math concepts and such they teach. I think it's more achievable at higher grade levels. It becomes much more challenging, I think, with the younger kids. So I guess, we just need to learn more. Again, it was, you kind of got me thinking the other way just based upon your well thought out discussion on this. Because again, I'm cold turkey with this. I mean, I haven't really given thought to it.
Absolutely, and that's what we do. That's why, he's assigned me and certainly engaging other administrators into doing that research so we can be ready. And I do want to speak to Mrs. Sloffman mentioned Zoom and Classroom. Yeah, those are fantastic tools, and we use Google Meet a lot, like you are tonight. And I can record that, and the student can watch that, download it, etc. It's limited in that classroom delivery world, though. I mean, me teaching you, I could do that. I could show you some things, but that's an individual teacher targeting an individual student, which is extra work, extra planning compared to I'm teaching this whole group. So if I set up my camera, even if I add a webcam that is a little higher quality to the top of my Chromebook and set it up, and you watch me teach and I record that, that's very different than digital interaction where you're expected to interact academically in real time with presentations and lessons that are designed for kids to have input instead of just watching. And, in digital instruction, we talk about asynchronous and synchronous delivery. So asynchronous, I don't have to be here live. I can watch the board meeting later because it's being recorded. But synchronous, I need to be there engaged with the teacher teaching the lesson. And I worry that live stream, although live, how can I as a teacher really engage that student when for 5 minutes we have this activity and it involves materials and things like that? It's better than nothing, but it would require a lot of planning and coordination by the teachers. I think it's a lot to ask, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities, but it would require equipment, no doubt about it.
It just seems to me like that's a bridge too far to try to have, the actual engagement from the student from home. I just think that's probably not practical. I think it's just going to be one way at best, especially considering the time constraints that we have, the financial constraints. That's just what I perceive. I've done online graduate courses, and it was a combination of just what, and it was fairly effective. But then again, you're talking about an adult that's motivated, has to get a good grade, or they got to pay for the course, one of those kind of things. And so it was a subject that interested me. So it was, I was more self-motivated than maybe your typical high school student was going to be. But in this case, they just presented a lecture. It was, given, actually, yes, it was live, but they had people attending the class in person. There wasn't much opportunity, if any, for feedback from the group, but they would have a chat session once a week where you could ask questions. So it wasn't, I thought, ideal, but it was at the graduate level by an established university. But I think we just have to get by with what we can in consideration of this as a one-off. It's not the way we're going to do things forever and a day, and we don't have time to build the perfect solution. I think there has to be a good enough. And so I think you should still continue to look at the company. Again, it was very informative to hear what you had to say. But as Virginia said, I think it's very important. It's critically important to do a broad survey across the teachers at all grade levels, because I think you're going to find varying opinions based upon grade levels. But also, what you said is pretty insightful too. Is that it's like, okay, if there's one kid are we really going to do this? You know, if there's 25 out of 30 want to do the online, then that can kind of shape your
Right.
perspective on this. So yeah.
And we did actually survey teachers about their level of interest in teaching remotely 100%. Not knowing what the demand would be, we do have a sense of who might be interested if we have a cohort of students large enough, again, in their licensure area too. So you've got
Right.
that to deal with. That is huge. You know, at grades 4, licensure changes, and most teachers, we have several that have multiple licensure areas, grades 4 through 9, but the 4 through 9 licensure is 2 subject areas. So, and then high school electives. You have a student that wants to take an art class, but we don't have an art teacher available for remote. We have full face-to-face art classes at our high school. And so creating, and I talked to art teachers during 4th quarter, that was tough. Art is about creation and using materials and doing things with your hand. It was very challenging for them to teach remotely. Another thing about like Zoom meetings or things like that, where things are recorded, many teachers recorded lessons during 4th quarter. Many had success with kids actually watching them. Many reported that students weren't watching them. And there is not a good way to ensure that that's happening. We don't have the technology sophisticated enough to monitor their time engaged
Right.
in a video that I post.
Mhm.
They can tell me they watched it, but I have no way of knowing. With companies that do this full time, there are ways to measure engagement, time on task, the actual
Yeah.
time they're logged into the site. They're not perfect metrics, but they're better than we have.
Mhm.
They also provide lots of parent support, and that is something we heard from parents. We need to help our parents with this remote learning. We didn't have time to do that. So they require a parent meeting. They have parent check-in meetings. They are engaging the school to make sure we know if a student's getting behind. I could go on, and I think that's probably for another meeting. I think that if we break this down, the first thing we have to know is who are the kids
How many?
that
Yeah.
are going to be remote. Do they receive special education services? Get the IEP team together, decide what that could look like for them. Effective support, effective services in a remote way, and how many kids do we have in each grade level, in each course, secondary, and then say, okay, let's talk to the staff and see where we can plug people in
Mhm.
or where we have gaps.
Mhm.
Okay, I like what you said. I agree with most of it, but here's the bottom line. There's a limit to the customer service we can provide. We do have a budget problem, and the teachers need to be surveyed first. I hope we're not committing in any way to this company till we have all those things nailed down. It is going to cost us something.
Yeah, I agree. And we talked a lot about that cost. Here's what we're trying to prevent. Families leaving the district and going to an online school. That's the
Right.
bottom line, because we've seen them on TV. They are advertising. Now, every kid in Ohio has some remote learning experience. Some may have liked it really well. And if they have an option in the fall, parents may choose to look at those options. We want our students and families to remain here in our community, in their own, student family. We're hoping that the remote choice would be temporary for them and not forever.
Right.
If we can provide a semester by semester option for someone who wants that, then those students remain as part of our district, and our net cost, of course, it is a cost per student, but we would still receive per student funding for that student, as opposed to them withdrawing and going elsewhere. So that's certainly been discussed. And you're right, it is a cost, and we just have to weigh the cost benefit. How much stress do we put on a slim staff during a very stressful time unlike any other going back to school this fall. And we hope it's just a semester, and we provide ways to engage that student perhaps and get to know that teacher that they might meet in January beforehand. You know, we're really sensitive to all those things, but yeah, we want our teachers teaching all students, but the reality is we're going to have some going 100% remote.
Yep. All right, any other questions? All right, Betsy, thank you so much for joining. Appreciate that very, very much. Dr. Kozia, thank you very much. I know this is a huge amount of work and planning and so forth, which you folks have put into this. I know it's not a finished product yet. Kudos to you folks, though, for the huge variety of considerations that we have to have in this whole process.
And so what I would consider doing here is put out a teacher survey of asking about the online versus the kind of the in-class model of with the camera and so forth, and seeing what staff's opinions and thoughts are on that. But in the very near future, we need to continue to move forward on this. And if we need to tweak and refine it, I think the big picture of it, we're offering in person and we're offering online, and we're going to work out those details of what that online piece is going to look like. But if we're okay with that, I think we need to move forward in the next week or so of really flushing this out and putting that out there so we can see whether it is 30 kids that want this online option or if it's 850 kids. And if it's 850, we've got to approach it very differently than if it's only 50 kids. But at some point in the very near future, we got to put this information out there so that we can get some feedback from the parents what their thoughts are.
Right. Yeah, knowing the numbers is going to be critical for us.
So I guess, are we okay with moving forward with those two pieces? So again, reaching out to teachers, seeing what their thoughts are about that, and then also in the very near future, putting the whole plan out there.
No, I think we'll need another meeting for you to tell us how the teachers felt, how many students we're looking at, how the parents felt.
That's information that can be sent out to us.
That's fine too, as long as we don't have an overall decision without us having the information.
I think we need to realize that the information the school is receiving from the governor's office and from the state changes day by day, and to come up with something that's going to really fit in with the state is one thing, but then we have to realize that our parents are not going to agree on anything. And we have to be flexible enough to give them options like they would like. But I think we also need to realize that there's always going to be somebody that's going to disagree with it. So we just need to do the best we can and do what's best for kids, and then we will be successful.
I'd like to have the numbers before we move forward.
Well, that's information that we can get.
Okay, I will do that. I will get that survey out as soon as possible and get that information as soon as possible.
All right, sounds great.
Okay, definitely do that.
Okay, going on to, anything else on that?
Unless other people have other questions or thoughts, I think that's it.
Okay.
Can I ask for just a little bit of clarification?
Sure.
Okay. So the masks for me are sort of made me rethink what we're going to do. Masks all day, recess. There's going to be recess or lunch. How will that? Can you kind of give us what it'll look like? Will they have lunch in their room? Will they have recess? Will there be time with other kids? What do you think that might look like?
Sure. What we're thinking what that might look like is mask will not, there won't be masks in the cafeteria because there'll be eating. There won't be masks outside as they're playing. And as we're going out to those two places, at this point, we are not thinking of wearing masks or face shields. We will socially distance at that point because of the challenge. And I say that K to 5, 6 to 12, yes, they will be expected to wear masks to and from the cafeteria. Obviously, when they're in cafeteria eating, they won't have that mask on. K to 5, the challenge with that, if they wear the mask to recess or to lunch, what do they do with that mask? You know, a 7th, 8th grader, they know they can put it in their pocket, they can sit on, you know, they know what to do with it. Your first graders are going to be falling on the floor. People are going to mix their masks up. And what are they going to do with it during recess? So the challenge of that is, you know, again, this is all about mitigating, minimizing risk, not totally eliminating it. And so that's what that would look like. We're going to keep classes together in the cafeteria, K to 5, because again, they'll be in their classroom, but they'll be eating in the cafeteria. Again, we think as in Greene County Health, you know, as you move food outside of the cafeteria, then you're dealing with temperature issues and other kind of, you're creating other situations and problems. So trying to keep that in there, the 6 to 12 level of doing as much social distancing as possible, but also of keeping those same kids in the same places so that they're interacting with the same kids every day. So, you know, those are probably two of our most challenging areas is recess and the cafeteria, because there is a level of you can't wear a mask while you're eating or a face shield.
Yeah.
Last night at
Thank
the
you.
Career Center, we talked about this, and they're planning to keep like the different groups, like all the carpentry students would be together all the time, and they would go to the cafeteria and eat at one time in their group, and they're calling them families. And if we could do something like that to keep a classroom, that they would go eat at one time and they wouldn't be intermingling with the other classes. And if they could go out to recess at one time and not intermingle with the other kids. I know it's important for them to get along with the other kids, but this will keep it so that if someone comes down with the virus, then they know what class needs to be quarantined, or what class needs to, the parents that need to be notified. And it seems like it might work with classrooms in the elementary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so K to 5 definitely doing that of sitting together. They already sit together at in the cafeteria, but I'm trying to spread those kids out even further, but making sure that they are sitting around the same kids each day. K to 5, yes. 6 to 12, you know, they're all coming from different classes into the cafeteria. So the plan for that was keeping those same kids together. They have to sit at the same seat every day. So again, that contact tracing of making sure that we know who they're sitting around every day. But they're all coming from different classes and so forth. So there's a challenge that we have to further to look into to see if we could figure that out. But at this point, for grade 6 to 12, it is they are sitting with the same group of kids every day to try to minimize, you know, the different contacts with people. But again, cafeteria and recess is going to be challenging times. Again, a lot of moving to this whole thing, and again, as we get new information out, it changes, and we tweak and refine and try to address all these different things. But you know, again, just I'll leave it here, and then we can move on. Is again, we think coming back to school compared to other things are the best thing to do for a vast majority of our students, and there isn't going to be a perfect option, and we're going to do the best we can to minimize, mitigate, you know, kids' exposure and so forth. But again, and we'll say it in the plan, there is a risk of coming back to school, just like there is a risk if you go to the store, if you go to the pool, if you go to play with other students or other kids in your neighborhood. There's a risk there with every situation where you're with other students. Again, we believe for a vast majority of our students, that risk is better outweighs than the isolation, the other situations with 100% online remote learning. Again, we might have to go to 100% online remote learning because the state is at that situation. Again, even as we're continuing to do these things, we are providing teachers in those first few days with more professional development, how to do blended learning, how to better effectively do those things, trying to get even more tools with them, but it's still, there's a learning curve there. So we're kind of doing two things at once here. We're planning for in-person, but also in the back of their mind, they're planning for either 50% or 100% remote also. So there's a lot going on in teachers' minds and administrators' mind of trying to plan for all those different scenarios. And I'll leave it at that. I know we've talked quite a bit, but good conversation. Again, very complex, complicated, and like I said, trying to do our best they can to try to meet everybody, as many people's needs as possible.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going on to item number 4, review of the agenda items. In the treasurer's report, item 5C is to request the approval of the resolution for final proceedings, the placement of a 5.7 mil continuing operating levy on the ballot. This is this is an opportunity for us to say yes or no. Are we putting it on the ballot or not putting it on the ballot? And it's already essentially this resolution was already cast in stone, so it's not up to change the amount or the type or anything like that. It's essentially an up or down on putting it on the ballot. Any questions or comments on that one? All right, going on to section 8, new business. A1 is 1-year limited employment contracts, Matthew Hall for a school psychology intern. Dr. Koza, do we know where that placement would be?
He's going to work throughout the school district.
Okay, so it would be multiple places. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Anna Valley is the school nurse, her home placement.
Yeah, she's going to be at the high school, replacing Ms. Kappenberger, who just retired. Yep. Okay.
And the Tanya Wilson intervention specialist, that's being dropped from the agenda. There were some questions that we still have to resolve regarding this, and so it's being dropped till those or if those are resolved. Going on to B, support staff employment, resignation, leave of absence. We do have a resignation from our high school secretary, Sherry Cruz. She's going on to other opportunities. Any questions or comments on that one?
David, I don't want to interrupt, but also that there is a hand carry for A8A also.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much.
Yep.
And I even have a note here that says CA, the supplementals, so my apologies. The recommended approval for unpaid leave of absence for the social studies teacher, John Rommel. Health issues for him, so it will be August 25th through the end of the school year. That's social studies. Questions or comments on that one? And then number 3, resignation for STR's retirement for Benita Taggart, effective the last day of August. Our art teacher. Any questions or comments about Benita's? Okay. And then we have number 4, athletic department volunteers, Chad Beck and Alex Fryman for boys cross country and assistant football coach for the middle school.
I'm sorry, David. I do have one question on number 3 there. Benita Taggart. I don't know.
Yes.
Doug, do you know if it says effective August 31st. So she's going to start school August 12th and work to the 31st.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that's what that meant. So,
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
And then going back to the treasurer's report, I'm sorry, because I skipped the supplemental page. Kevin has a requesting approval of the then and now certificate in the amount of shy of $8,000 for additional 2019-20 services. And this is something where we didn't have the PO out before we had the bill come in. Is that right?
Well, yes, but actually what we're doing here, during a school year, the amount of the services, the cost of the services to the ESC are estimated. And so we pay them every month an estimated amount. And then in July, they give us what the actual costs were, depending on how many kids we had in each one of the programs over there, SBH or whatever variety, and all the therapies and everything else.
Okay.
And then we true it up. But we have to close the PO at the end of the fiscal year, and then we get the true up that we owe this amount of money that wasn't paid in the estimates. And there's no purchase order for it because it was the previous year. And I said, let's just do it the right way and satisfy the auditors so that everyone's happy.
Okay.
So it's no additional money than what we already knew we'd have to pay in a true up.
Okay. Any questions for Kevin on that one? All right, I'm going back to the regular agenda now. I think I've hit it. The supplementals in A. B was the support staff employment resignation, leave of absence. We already mentioned Sherry Kreutz. The C is the student parent handbooks, recommending approval of the revisions. Anyone have questions on those revisions?
No.
All right, thank you. The board policy additions, revisions. We had a first read on the board policy for interscholastic athletics, again, which was removing some of the fourth quarter academic standards because of the fourth quarter scenario that we had for last school year. So any questions about that one? I think that was the entirety of the change associated with it for now.
Yeah, so essentially every student is eligible grade 7 to 12 going into next year in the fall only. So that's essentially what it boils down to.
And then going on to item E, accepting student for transportation. This is transporting a student from Xenia Community Schools to Incarnation. Our buses go right near that house. We've got Xenia District is on one side of Pennywitt, and our school district is across the street. So this is picking up somebody on the other side of the street to help them get over to Incarnation. It's not unusual for us to share responsibilities for busing when that makes it more efficient and cost effective.
Right, and so we already have a bus going to Incarnation, so we're just going right past there anyways. They'll come here and then they'll get off the bus and they get on the bus to go to Incarnation, and we do get the money for that, so it's a win-win.
All right. And then we do have an executive session to be added to our board meeting this evening for the purpose of discussing with the board attorney issues that are subject of pending or imminent court action. So, any questions on the agenda? Most of it? All right. Well, you have an opportunity to discuss individual items again when the motions are made. So I'll go on to the treasurer's report. Kevin Liming.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the special meeting on June 8th, the regular meeting June 11th, and the special meeting June 30th?
I'll move.
Mrs. France.
Second.
Mrs. Sloughman. Any questions or comments on the minutes? All right, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. France,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Can I get a motion to approve the treasurer's report for the month of June?
So moved.
Mrs. Long,
Second.
Mrs. Luckman.
Just wanted to say that this is the end of the fiscal year report, and I wanted you to look especially at the first blue sheet if you have your hard copy agenda there in front of you. Just wanted to review a few things because obviously these are strange times financially too, and if you have the first sheet there that's blue, you can see under revenues over to the right, we're comparing the budgeted amount that we budgeted at the beginning of the fiscal year with what actually happened for the fiscal year. And we were good in most of the areas there, except obviously for state foundation because that was cut. So we received more in total than we estimated at the beginning of the year. And under the expenditures, we spent quite a bit less than we estimated. The reason for that, of course, was that during the COVID situation where we missed a few months of school, we spent a lot less on supplies, equipment, substitute salaries, things like that.
Right.
And saved a lot of money there, if you want to call it savings, utilities, electric. And then with the reductions are, going into effect too. And we received, under revenues, we received more in real estate taxes, we mentioned that the last time, than we expected. So the end of year balance was better than we anticipated, and that was good news. We did finish the year with kind of the same as we've been saying about all year, where we had about 79% of our budget spent for salaries and benefits. That's very normal for a school district, maybe a little low even. And under revenues, about 27 or 28% from state funding, and just a couple, maybe 2% from federal. All the rest of that is local. 63% real estate taxes and about 10% other. So any questions about any of the rest of the report there?
And why was the fees and miscellaneous higher than expected under revenue?
Yeah, the main thing is that it's the way that that audit expects us to handle advances. So if I have a grant that is going to finish the month 100,000 in the red, because you have to spend the money first before the state will reimburse you. You spend it, you give them a report, and then a couple weeks later we get reimbursed. Well, you're not allowed to end a month in the red, so they have us advance money from the general fund or borrow. Well, when that's paid back to the general fund, that's counted as a receipt. I think it overstates the revenues what it does, but we had a lot of those advances, a lot more than I thought we were going to have to do this year. They all are all paid back and all that, but that's what inflated that. Is I just had a couple other minor things like a $150,000 Medicaid sum that I didn't think, due to a class action suit that I didn't realize was going to extend into the third year. That was in there, but most of that is that advance borrowing and repayment of it to the general fund. So it's not more money that we received in that line item.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Yep.
All right, call the roll.
Okay, Mrs. Freeman? Mrs.
sorry?
France?
Here, yes.
Mrs. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman?
Yes.
And Mr. Carpenter?
Yes, motion passes.
Okay, can I get a motion to, under C there, to approve proceeding with the levy and the placing it on the November 3rd ballot? If passed, I will file it tomorrow morning with the Board of Elections of Greene County and Xenia. And the resolution as prepared by our bonding attorney is the last page, 2 pages there in your blue part of your agenda.
So moved, Mr. Carpenter.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. France? Is there any additional questions or comments? I know we went through this pretty extensively last time. All right, Mr. Lady, call the roll.
Okay, Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. France,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
No.
Motion passes.
David, quick
Yeah.
comment here, just for, especially for the benefit of people that maybe are tuning in for the first time, and didn't have the advantage of hearing our discussion. The reason I voted against this tonight, as I did last time, was because I'm of the strong opinion that our school district is faced with a fiscal emergency, that we should have gone with a emergency levy that in one word conveys the seriousness of the situation that we're faced with. By returning to the same type of levy that we have previously, I think we're at risk of this levy failing again in November, at least this way, at an increased risk of it not passing. I was also of the opinion that we should have gone with a limited period levy because there was a segment of our community that is has complained that or felt that they should not be signing up for a permanent levy. And so it's for those two reasons that I voted against it. That said, let me be very clear. This levy needs to pass. If it doesn't, it will seal the disaster that has happened to date. So it's my heartfelt, hope that when we wake up on November 4th, that we're going to find out that it passed. If it didn't, have something to think about. So again, I'm trying to be responsive to a community that has indicated that they do not want a permanent levy. At least some number in our community feel that way. And again, I think we're losing the opportunity to convey the seriousness of the situation by just putting the same levy on that's failed the last two times, when we could have, in one word, really sent a serious message. Because people are going to get the bucket of water. They're somewhat getting it now, but they're really going to get it on day one of school. And they realize this freshman sports are gone, those clubs are gone, the busing isn't there. They're really going to understand that. And when they realize that we can return most of these things, what can be returned is still somewhat TBD, but at least a large part of what's been cut can be returned. And if they realized that we were calling it an emergency, then they could have seen those things largely returned in November. Anyhow, all that said, I hope the heck this thing passes. It needs to pass. If it doesn't, we've sealed our fate here. And but I just could not, in good conscience, try to do what I did the last two times, and it failed. It's time to try something different. But I hope y'all are right, and I hope it comes out favorably. And I just wanted to go into this. Exchange here, just especially for the benefit of folks that maybe are like, what the heck, what's going on here, and why am I voting against it or whatnot. And I just want to be very, very clear as to why that's so.
I just think that from past experience, the fact that we have a split board vote on this levy is going to do more harm than one word could in an emergency levy, because I think that the no people are going to take it and run, that Kevin did not agree with the rest of the board, and they're not going to try to explain why he didn't. So I have to express the opinion, because that's what has happened in the past, and I'm really afraid that's going to hurt us. So,
Well, Mary, again, I appreciate your comment. But I think there's something to be said too about a board that always doesn't vote unanimously on everything. There needs to be diversity of thought, diversity of opinion. There needs to be discussion. And if the story gets told about what I just said, and of course there'll be selective extracts of what I just said, but the big takeaway is, I'll say it again, this levy needs to pass. It absolutely needs to pass. We are in a crisis. It must pass, or it's a sealed fate for our district. But if it does fail, then hopefully next time, what my opinion I've expressed here will carry more weight, and we will look at alternatives to how we fund the school system. largely driven by a state construct that, in fact, almost exclusively driven by a state construct, but also the unique, situation we find in our community where we have very little commercial development. It's therefore we're driven to basically property tax-based solutions for funding our school system. And so, but that's how I feel about it. I appreciate your opinion. We should be able to have frank discussions like this. You're probably right. There's going to be a segment that's going to take everything I've said tonight, and run with it. But, I think that's a minority of people, and people that really want to be informed and listen. They'll hear, my heartfelt hope that this thing passes. But there also needs to be an understanding that there is diversity of thought, and there needs to be alternative considerations, especially if it fails now. Hopefully then it will take root that we need to look solidly for alternatives.
I agree. Let yes be yes and no be no.
All right. Anything else? Thank you very much. And I do appreciate the fact that we have a diversity of thought and a willingness to speak up. And I appreciate the fact that you really want this to pass, as do the rest of us too. So we're certainly unified in that regard. All right.
I do have one more.
Continue on, yes, from the supplemental.
Could I get a motion to approve 5D there? Event amount certificate, as we spoke about earlier, to the Greene County ESC for $7,988.68 for true up on their service for 1920.
We have a motion. Mrs. Loftman?
Second.
Mrs. Long? Any questions, comments? All right, Kevin, call the roll.
Okay, Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes,
and Mrs. France.
Yes.
motion passes. All right, going on to correspondence. Anybody have any correspondence that they want to share or comment on? Okay. All right, moving on to open communication. We did have one person sign up for open communication, Carlos Rivera, and he wants to talk a little bit about school reopening and special needs students. So Dr. Kozad is reaching out to him so that we can all hear.
I'm working on it.
Okay. We'll play the Jeopardy music while that's going on again.
All right. Carlos, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We good? Can you hear Carlos, Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir. Yep.
The reason why I wanted just to speak briefly is I've seen, and this is not anything to do with the district. This has to do with on the state level. When you hear some of the plans, it doesn't seem that special needs kids are taken into consideration as much more an afterthought. Again, this is nothing to do with the district. It has to do with some of the state guidelines. And some have, but the concern is, like, for example, we had an IEP meeting in May, and the reason why we had the IEP meeting is I wanted the entire team to know that in the middle of a pandemic, I was not going to hold them to the fire about any of the things that we normally do, because we have a pandemic, the community has to come together. And what I would ask, especially when it applies to children with special needs, is that there needs to be a lot of flexibility. You have, just for example, just some things off the top of my head. children that have sensory issues, the wearing of masks, children that have social issues, social challenges. What's going to happen with the enforcing of social distancing? How is that going to impact them? You have some special needs kids might want to do remote learning, but yet use the paraprofessionals one-on-one in person. Those type of things I would ask, because at the end of the day, this is a pandemic and we come together as a community. The important thing is that we have to remember that, because, for example, we're starting school. There's a good possibility 3 weeks into the school year, parents are going to have to be flexible because, God forbid, but there might be some children that end up contracting COVID, and then you have to shut down a building or shut down a classroom or quarantine for 14 days or however, and we all have to play it by ear. One of the things, in fact, that Virginia mentioned in the meeting earlier, which I'm so glad that she did mention, is that we have to give you guys that same flexibility, because there's teachers that have comorbidities where COVID is a much bigger problem for them than it would be for the population in general. They might have a spouse who has a comorbidity, which would make it that much more difficult also. So they need to be able to teach remotely. This is what I would ask of the board and obviously the superintendent is to, as a community, we understand that it's a pandemic, but we need a lot of flexibility, and there needs to be, just for example, one other situation that came to mind is that we have told parents and students, if you have a cold, if you have a runny nose, don't go to school. Or we're starting in the fall. How many children have a runny nose for 2 weeks? Those are things that are going to occur, which we know are going to occur. And I just think that whatever plan, one of the things I just wanted to mention, because when Virginia mentioned it, if we don't contact their company, if we have teachers, our own teachers, doing remote learning, I think it gives us a much better chance for that flexibility. And that flexibility now is magnified because it's tough on all kids, it's tough on all adults. But when you add the component of having children to have additional challenges, take that and magnify it exponentially. And that's the one thing I would ask is that you try to understand that there's a pandemic, as a community we come together and give each other as much leeway and as much flexibility as possible. And that's it. So I didn't even use my 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Carlos.
Okay. Take care. Take care. Bye now. Okay.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, Carlos, for calling in and sharing your thoughts with us on that. I think that we're in agreement and in alignment with the kinds of things that you're asking about, wanting to be able to accommodate as many of the needs and requests as we possibly can.
And I would agree. There definitely needs to be a lot of flexibility and a lot of grace and just a lot of we'll put some things in place and then we'll see how it goes, and then we need to refine and tweak and be very flexible. Have a solid plan in place, but also have enough that you can be flexible with things and change once conditions change too. So I agree with that.
All right, going on to new business then, sir.
Okay. So 8A, certified licensed staff employment, resignation, leave of absence, supplemental duty. Number 1, recommend approve the following 1-year limited employment contract effective with the 2020-21 school year. Previous approval, unless designated with the asterisk there. So Matthew Hobb, school psych intern, and Anna Valley, certified school nurse.
So
All right.
moved.
Mrs. Long,
Second.
Mrs. France. Any questions or comments? All right, Mr. Lyman, call the roll.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. France,
Yes.
and Mrs. Long.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, I'm now over to the hand carry. So 8A2, recommend approval request for unpaid leave of absence for social studies teacher John Rommel effective August 25th, 2020 for the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year.
We have
So
a motion.
moved.
Mrs. France,
Second.
Mrs. Sloughman. Any questions, comments? All right, Mr. Lyman, call the roll.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. France,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
and Mr. Price.
Yes.
Motion passes. So we wish Mr. Rommel the very best.
Recommend acceptance of resignation for the purpose of full Ohio STRS retirement from art teacher Bonita Taggart effective end of day August 31st, 2020.
So moved.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Second.
Mrs. Long. Any questions or comments? Okay. Mr. Lyman, call the roll.
Mrs. France,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter.
Yes. Motion passes. And we wish her the very best in her retirement.
Definitely. Recommend approval of the following athletic department volunteers for the 2020-21 school year: Chad Beck and Alex Fryman.
Have a motion.
So moved.
Mrs. Long,
Second.
Mrs. Sloughman. Questions or comments? All right, call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. France,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
and Mrs. Sloughman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, back over to the original paperwork. Support staff B, support staff employment resignation leave of absence. Recommend acceptance of resignation from Secretary Sherry Crude effective immediately.
Have a motion.
So moved.
So moved.
Mrs. Long, and then a second by Mrs. Sloughman. Any questions or comments? All right, please call the roll.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
and Mrs. France.
Yes.
Motion passes.
C, recommend approval of revisions to student parent handbooks grades K-12 for the 2020-21 school year.
All right, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Well, Mrs. Sloughman, and we'll have a second from Mrs. Long.
Deal.
Any questions or comments?
No, Dave, as I reviewed them, I mean, they were pretty innocuous, right? Like adding the right area code and, or actually adding the area code to phone numbers and adjusting start times and typos that were corrected. So there's nothing of substance that I saw
Right.
in any of those. So.
Right. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's not materially changing.
Right. The high school is moving back to 8:20 to 3:20 to accommodate traffic and since there's no busing next year for high school. There was 8 to 3 this year. Now it's 8:20 to 3:20 next school year, so that BCI and the middle school will stay at the same time. So all those busing traffic will be out there before the high school traffic comes in there.
Yeah. That's a good plan. Any other questions or comments? Okay, call the roll, please.
Okay, Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
I think she didn't hear you.
oh, Mrs. Sloughman.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see, Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. France,
Yes.
And Mrs. Long.
Yes.
Motion passes.
D, board policy additions, revisions. Recommend approval of the following revision to board policy number 2431, interscholastic athletics.
You have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. France,
Second.
Mrs. Long. Any questions or comments? Again, this is everybody eligible for sports. All right, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. France,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
and Mr. Price.
Yes.
Motion passes.
E, accept student for transportation. Recommend acceptance of the following student from Xenia Community Schools for the purpose of transportation to Incarnation School for the 2020-21 school year. Kaylin Bernecker.
On Calumet Road. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Long, Mrs. Sloughman. Any questions or comments? All right, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. France,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman.
Yes.
Motion passes. And
Items, information, discussion. I don't have anything. Does anybody have anything for that?
just a comment that piggybacking on Mr. Price's comment earlier about looking for additional or alternative ways for funding. I think it's time that while this levy campaign will go on for the continuing levy, we certainly need to start getting an understanding out in our community about what an income tax would mean, particularly for our retired population, fixed income or pension income, Social Security income only, and as a way to diversify our revenue stream and not base it solely on property tax. So I think that that's something I'll probably touch base with you about, Mr. Price, and help us get engaged with the Finance Committee to start some of that process of education and understanding in the community of other ways that we might be able to fund our schools.
Yeah, David, an approach such as that could actually would actually see a reduction in the tax burden on our elderly population, those on fixed income. So it should be broad-based support, even by those that have been very vocally against the levy. They would almost have to support it because one of the main champions positions they've had is we need to not tax our elderly. So this gives them an opportunity to actually see our elderly's tax burden go down. So I'm sure we can gain additional support for that. It'd be hard to argue against that one.
Yeah.
The other thing, Mary, going back to your comment, where you're displeased with my vote. One thing as well, with respect to that, hopefully this will motivate people to realize the work is seriously cut out ahead in the next few months for those that are going to support this levy. I think it's going to have to work doubly hard to be effective. And I think by my voting no, it signals that there is, some concern with this levy as it's going to be presented. So hopefully my sending a vote will motivate the community as a whole to go out and work extra hard to see this levy be successful, because it has to be, or else we are in serious jeopardy for our district. So anyhow, so for those that care, get busy.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? All right, going on now. Finally, we do have an executive session. I'll need a motion for the purpose of this executive session for the purpose of discussion with the board attorney, issues that are the subject of pending or imminent court action per RC 121.22 paragraph G3. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Sloughman
Second.
and Mrs. Long for second. Mr. Iving, please call the roll.
Hey, Mrs. France,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
and Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, motion passes. For the public listening, we'll go into a separate session for executive session. We will return to this session after executive session to have our adjournment. We do not anticipate any formal action after we leave executive session. All right, so board members, please leave this session and sign into our executive session Google Meets. have reconvened in our public session. And do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Mrs. Long,
Again,
Mrs. France? Is there, oh, I don't think there's any discussion on that one. Thank you all very much. Kevin, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. France,
yes,
France, Mrs. Long.
yes.
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman.
I saw her lips move, but Virginia, you're muted.
I'm here. Yeah, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted though.
Yes.
There we go. Thank you so much. All right, we are adjourned at 9:33.